Hello and welcome to episode 1 of Model Making Man, the first episode where we're actually going to stop talking and start making. A huge thank you to everybody who sat through episode 0. Appreciate your patience, had some very kind comments. Hopefully we should be a bit more regular now, and that will spur me to get a bit more work done than I have been. The next part of the build is the legs. We've got some work to do on the underside yet, but if we can get the legs made, the basic shapes, we can start attaching them, set up a pose, fix them into place, and then we can start on the detail. So without further ado, let's have a look at the first leg. So here's one of the legs taken from the Bandai 144 scale, 8080. As always, Bandai are absolutely stunning with the detail. No glue needed whatsoever. There are so many points of movement on this, it's incredible. You can put it in just about any pose you can imagine. Beautiful. Quite complex, there's all sorts of things going on there. But if we just concentrate on this section from here to here, it's quite a simple basic shape. Just check the narrowest point here, and we'll make the main body of the leg that narrow, and all the extra bits of detail, armour plating, this raised section here, we can build that up later on. First of all, concentrate on this. So the first thing I tend to do when I've had a good long look at it and work out the basic shapes is take a lot of measurements and make some very rudimentary sketches. These are just to refer back to. The sizes I've marked on here are the actual sizes of the upscale, so everything's been measured in millimeters and fractions of a millimeter sometimes, multiplied by 4, and then the new number, the larger size, is on here. So these are the actual measurements of the walker itself. Just a quick word about one of these. This is called a micrometer. It's digital, incredibly cheap, considering it seems to be very accurate to 1/10 of a millimeter. This one cost me about £5, something like that. They're very simple to use. You just have to make sure you remember to zero it if it doesn't say 0 when it's closed. You can measure between these points here and also these points here, so you can measure inside something, and this is always the same as this, so you can trust that number. It's very, very accurate. It's got a nice smooth action on it. It stays where you leave it. Maybe when it gets old it'll stop moving. I used to have one of these with just a pointer on here, and you had to just try and gauge by eye how many fractions of a millimeter it was. This was an excellent device, which I'm so glad somebody put me onto, because it's so easy to use and it's so accurate and it's so cheap, it's ridiculous. So I'm very pleased with that, and if you've not got one, I highly recommend you treat yourself. So we've got our measurements, we've got some very rudimentary sketches, they're good enough. We've always got this to refer back to. So the next stage, or my next stage, you can do it a better way I'm sure, is to transfer this onto some decent stiff cardboard to make some templates. Okay, I apologise for the lighting, it's not great. I will have to do something about that. Right, so the main part of the leg, from the shoulder here down to the ankle joint, I decided to build this section. This nubbin section here I'm going to add later. So what I'm doing is I'm making this basic shape as one piece here, and then this piece here down to a flat end like that, and then I can build this over the top of it. So what I'm concentrating on now is basically from here and then follow this down here. As I mentioned before, there are various thicknesses as we go down. So the easiest way I found to do this is to look at the narrowest part, take that as a measurement, and build the basic shape to that thickness. Once that's done, we can add extra paneling on here. There's a little bit to do on the back. We can bulk it up, but for now, just this basic shape from here to here. So I've managed to boil it down to these three basic shapes. The circular sections chopped off here, I'll explain later. What I did with the legs for the ATST, after a lot of messing around and trying just solid pieces of wood, I found the best way to do it, or the best way I found to do it, was to laminate 6mm ply. The ply is a lot stronger than, say, pine or an MDF. Also, it's just the right thickness that we can sandwich four together to get the basic diameter here, which works out perfectly. That's taking the glue into account, which is an expanding glue, which makes the whole thing a bit thicker still. But it's still going to be smaller than we actually need, because we have to clad it with plasticard. So once we've got the basic shape, we can work out how thick the plasticard has to be to bond to it to make the final correct size. I made a template in card here. These two pieces and these two pieces were originally attached, and then for other sections, like we needed some sections of this whole piece and then some sections of just this piece. This is where the sockets for the ankle, for the knee and the shoulder will go. I'll show you how that came about. And here we are with a rather motley selection of leg pieces and one of the wooden leg skeletons. The first thing to do is work out how many pieces of each template we're going to need for each leg. I'll go through those in a second. Then we transfer them onto our sheet of ply. I think, I'll check, but I think it was 6mm ply I went with in the end. Cut all the pieces out. Fortunately, at this point of the build, where we don't have to be too careful, we don't have to cut it with a laser, it doesn't have to be exact. As long as it's slightly smaller than what you need, because we're going to clad it with plastic card, everything can be built up, filled, sanded and filled around with. As long as this is strong, as long as this is strong, we're good to go. The joint in the middle is very simple. It won't be a posable model. I'm trying to keep it simple. What we would do is have the components, fix them temporarily to the AT-AT once we've got a foot, and then decide on its pose. I did this with the AT-ST and it made life a lot easier because of the balance and what have you. We just basically screw them, countersink the screws into place. When we're happy with the pose and the model stands as you want it to, stick a couple of extra screws in any way you like just to secure it. And then we can move on to the next stage. But before we get there, we have to make these and we have to clad them in plasticard. So briefly, here's a checklist of what we need for each leg. This is one leg, top half, I suppose we can call that the thigh and the shin with the knee joints here. If we start with the lower section, when these were still joined together, looking something like that, we cut two of these, one for each side, and the reason I cut that off was to separate that piece. So we have two of these to sit in the middle to act as a spacer. So we're going to need two of the whole thing and two of this section for each leg. Going on to the top half, the rear of the leg, we just need one of these, so that's four of those in total. Two sections in the centre which run the full length, and that's this whole piece here, so 2 of those, and then we disconnect that and we put this section in the middle. I've also disconnected that, but for some reason, I suppose I was just being quick, I didn't cut that off, I just sketched it to here and then drew a circle. So that's the top section. This will be on the outside of the 8080 leg, because we need the top piece is more recessed for the detail that goes in the top here, which we'll work out later. So when we've got all of those pieces together, I've got a very, very ugly and rudimentary lump of wood that is movable, but it is very strong. Again, once I've got the pose for the individual legs, there'll be probably 3 screws in each one, countersunk, and the plastic card will go over the top so you won't know it's there. And this worked with the ATST, and the legs are very, very strong indeed. You also have the added bonus that they're quite heavy, so that helps with the balance of the finished model, keeping the centre of gravity as low as you can at all times. Now, don't get me wrong, I love wood, but that is not a pretty thing, it's downright ugly. This is not a very satisfying part of the build. You cannot finish the day with a pile of these and feel I've done a good job there. But you can if it's strong, but as something to look at, it's downright hideous. So happily, the next step is to cover that completely in styrene or plastic card, which another favourite product. It's amazing stuff, it's very versatile, and once that is covered in plastic card, everything's easier. You're filling, sanding, sticking detail to it, and it's just like making a large model kit, much better. Get the skeleton out the way and then we can start having some fun again. The problem is finding a decent way to glue plastic onto wood securely so it doesn't peel off, which is a problem I had early on in my ATST build. Tried lots of glues, 5-minute epoxy, different types of super glue gels. Nothing worked, it always peeled off. And then somebody put me onto this Gorilla Glue. They make a wood glue as well, so don't get them mixed up. This is their general purpose glue, which is, if you can imagine a foam super glue, then that's what this is. It's amazing stuff, it's really good. It does expand a lot, that's the problem. When you're making something with the expanding glue, you have to clamp it really firmly because this is amazingly strong. I've put clamps on things, used this, and it's just opened up. And you get this horrible beige mush sticking out of the gaps. It's just ghastly. But used properly, it's brilliant, brilliant stuff, and you can rely on it to hold it forever. So a quick word on cutting these shapes. Refer back to your sketches where I've already got the measurements, the real-time measurements jotted down. They're very simple shapes. The easiest way I found to do it was to draw a centre line and then work out the circles first. Just use a regular schoolboy compass for drawing the circles, and then all the straight lines coming off. One tip I found, I forget who, somebody on the forum put me onto this. We need several of each, so what I did was cut out the first 3, and in here, where the centre of the compass was, I take my pin vise and drill a hole. The reason for that is when you've put that on your sheet of plastic card and you've drawn around it to make the other ones, you can mark where the compass hole will be. Makes life a lot easier than drawing this and then having to find the circle to use your circle cutter on it. So that little hole saves you an awful lot of trouble. And of course it's very easy to fill in on the finished model, so the original template will be one of the pieces we need. So these are the tools I use to cut out the plastic card or styrene template. Metal ruler with a scalpel, any hobby knife of course. I prefer these because they're nice and solid and they're very cheap. And this here is from a hobby shop. This is used to cut circles in card if you're greetings card making. But it has a metal blade and it will cut plastic just as well. Well, maybe not just as well. Very cheap, like I say, very effective. You can cut rather large circles or rather small circles. It takes a bit of getting used to. It works the same as a compass. You put that point in the centre and then you just keep turning it until it cuts through. The best way to do this is be patient because it's designed to cut through card rather than plastic. The blade will do the job. You even get half a dozen spares in here. But what you have to do is just take your time and slowly cut through. The first cuts, the first circle, shouldn't really be any more than a scratch, because if you apply too much pressure and you go sideways, put the line off circle, it's going to follow that every time and you'll get a very wobbly circle. So just take your time and that will do the job for very little money. Okay, so we're getting ready to start attaching the styrene. Again, at this point, I'm not too worried about perfection. Hopefully that will come later. Okay, we'll start with one of the shins. Now, the first thing to remember is how shiny this is. There's not much of a key to that. So what we will do there is use one of these. I forget where I got this from. It's just for polishing metalwork. It's got a metal tooth to it. So the surface that's going to be attached to the wood, we just give it a good scuffing. Just keep going and keep going. Pressing as hard as you like. Make sure you get to all the edges. Okay. I don't know if that'll pick up on camera. Probably not, but it's very, very scuffed. So that will now fix to the wood. I'll just do the other one and then we'll start gluing. Okay, so that should be nice and scuffed now. So the next thing is to use the glue. Now, as I mentioned before, this is water activated. So the easiest way I find is just a bowl of water and just add some water to one of the surfaces. I tend to go for the wood because it colours it when it's damp and you can see that you've got everywhere. Not too much, just a little like that. Okay, next up, take your scuffed side, apply a little of this, not a great deal because it really does expand an awful lot. That's probably more than enough. I just used an offcut of styrene just to spread it out a bit. Get a good coverage. Okay. You'll see I've got gloves on. This glue is just nasty. Get it on your fingers. Just get some disposable gloves. Now, I'm not worried too much about going right to the end because it will expand in that direction. And also if you bodge it all up around the end, you've got more to pour out and be gross later. So that's one. Pop that on there. It takes a while to go off, so you've got plenty of time to manoeuvre it. I'll just do the other one and we'll be right back. Well, that's the two sides on. There's still a bit of movement in it, so we can position it at our leisure. Now, as recommended on the bottle, the best way to secure a lot of things while it's drying, it takes 1 to 2 hours. I tend to leave it longer than that to make sure. Tape. There is a tape available. They recommend their own tape, surprisingly. But I find the best, or the cheapest way, is just to use some standard wire insulating tape. You can get 5 rolls of this for about £1, something like that. So let's pop some of that on. I've cut a load of links off and I've got them stuck to the edge of the bench here. Usually start in the middle, make sure everything's straight and not put it on too tight to begin with. So you've got a bit of movement in it still. And as it gets more secure, I just add more and more tape. Now, as with most tapes, the best thing this tape sticks to is itself. So I made a right mess of that. So make sure that your pieces are long enough to wrap right round. Same with masking tape. If you use masking tape, you can wrap it right round the piece and it sticks to itself very happily. As it's starting to be held into place, we can start getting tighter and tighter with the tape. It also likes to stick to these gloves. There we go. Now at the top, because we've got the section in the middle, the glue's going to push the wood away from the styrene. So what I'm going to do there is just get the other part of the leg and just wedge that in there while it's drying. It'll go in. It's starting to push it closed already. And then tape around it. I'll do that so I've got 2 hands free and I'll be right back. So that's suitably mummified. I've stuck some clamps on as well because you can never be too careful. It's already starting to seep out here and there. Don't worry about that, it's got to go somewhere. When this dries, it's starting to firm up now. When it dries, it's like an expanding foam and it's very easy to cut with a knife. You see on this piece here, you can just run a knife down it. And the other advantage of that, because it's honeycombed, when you come to fill the edges, it's a good surface for putty and filler to attach to. So that's actually another advantage. Hopefully this section will come free here. I didn't put too much glue on the end here so that it doesn't seep through and hold on to that. If it does, there's not much area covered, so we can just put the edge of a blade in there and slice it through the glue. So there we are. Just leave that a few hours and then have a look. So the glue's dried. I left it about 3 hours. All of the tape off so we can throw that. That's why I go for the cheap option. You can use as much as you like. Yep, that's solid now. So we're getting the bottom half here coming together. Don't worry too much about perfection. This is all going to be filled. That doesn't have to be a perfect circle because we're going to build raised detail and then fill that to match everything else. This is purely the base layer. Got a nice scratch down there where I cut the tape off. Didn't bother me because this is going to be covered with armour plating. So all that remains for this leg at this stage is to get the other section, glue these two on in the same manner, and then repeat that process for the other 3 legs. So we'll end there for today. I'm going to go and get all the rest of the legs up to this stage, and then in episode 2 I'll show you how we fill all of these, and then perhaps put a bit of detail on. We'll see how we go. Okay, well, thank you very much for watching. I hope you managed to stay to the end and stay awake. Hopefully the next one will be up within the week, and see you then. Bye-bye.